近平！习近平！道歉吧，都可以道歉了。卡塔尔世界杯现在聚集了世界上所有最有钱的人。
China is on fire right now. What you're seeing right now is the biggest uprising in China that we've seen in a very long time. That's because in China, protesting against the CCP is punishable by life in prison. And sometimes even death. People regularly disappear in China for going up against the government. But right now, people all across China are standing up in a rare act of defiance. In fact, this is the biggest mass protest since Tiananmen Square. And it's all because they've had enough of this.
China's zero COVID policy has pushed society to the limit. And that's because so many of the zero COVID policies are excessive, inhumane, or just plain stupid.
But for people to understand how strict this COVID crackdown has been, I've been talking to people who have family in China, talking about throughout the level of people not being able to move.
One of my friends was locked in his apartment for 90 days.
Yeah. So
not allowed out of his apartment except for testing for 90 days.
And we know people starve to death in Shanghai.
I don't care what your culture is or what your religion is or where you're from, but the idea of having your child, your toddler taken away from you to a quarantine camp is absolutely appalling.
Yes.
No zero COVID policy, but freedom. No zero COVID policy, but freedom. No zero COVID policy, but freedom. No zero COVID policy, but freedom.
Subscribe for more, and this is the revolution brewing in China. And really fast, if you have your own business and you're still doing everything yourself, stop being a one-man army. It's time to start outsourcing some of your work so you can focus on the things you're best at. The problem is outsourcing is tough and expensive. It typically costs $4,000 to hire a new employee. You gotta sort through candidates, find the right person, handle payroll, raises, vacation days, it's just a hassle. That's why you gotta check out Business Rocket. Business Rocket is a subscription service that allows you to get unlimited graphic design, social media marketing, virtual assistant, and software development from a full-time local employee for as low as $99 a month. That's right, a full-time employee for as low as $99 a month. For example, let's say you need some graphic design. You could go through the trouble of hiring a designer yourself, or you can just pay $139 a month for your own full-time graphic designer on Business Rocket that can do everything you need done in the realm of graphic design. Need a software developer? They usually cost over $100,000 a year. But with Business Rocket, you get one for only $399 a month. You also get 24/7 access to one of Business Rocket's project managers, so whenever you need any work done, you simply tell them what you need. There's no commitments and you can cancel at any time, and they even have a 7-day free trial. Business Rocket makes these low prices possible by economies of scale. Everyone who works at Business Rocket gets paid a full-time salary, meaning their monthly costs are fixed, allowing Business Rocket to offer the best price possible while giving you guys the best quality possible. Stop being a one-man army and see for yourself if this service is a good fit for your business risk-free. Head to businessrocket.io/JakeTran to sign up today for your free 7-day trial. That's businessrocket.io/JakeTran with the link below. Thanks to Business Rocket for sponsoring this video.
In Wuhan, China incubates the virus that will eventually spread across the world.
So it's just about 3 a.m. I've got my mask on in the midst of a rush that essentially they are putting Wuhan, the city limits, under a lockdown.
Patients in isolation units being treated by doctors in biohazard suits. pharmacies struggling to keep masks on the shelves. The city of 11 million now halting all public transportation and outbound flights.
Hi, how are you? My name is Ben Kavanagh. I live in Wuhan, and today I'm going to go to the shop. One mask, another mask. Apparently this mask actually doesn't do much, but 2 masks is always better than 1. Can't forget the most important thing, and the silliest thing.
February 2020. Wuhan and surrounding provinces are first to implement mandatory lockdowns.
Drastic measures to halt the spread of that deadly virus. Wuhan, China, ground zero for the outbreak, now under lockdown.
China formally announces its now infamous zero COVID policy, with China's CDC proclaiming that, quote, "The current strategic goal is to maintain no or minimal indigenous transmission of SARS-CoV-2 until the population is protected through immunization with safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines," end quote. From there, China and Xi Jinping would stick to this zero COVID policy no matter the costs. December 2020, China announced that China's Sinopharm vaccine is approved for use among the Chinese population. 4 months later, the head of China's CDC says that Chinese vaccines actually don't work that well. In fact, they are only 50% effective, and this would prove disastrous to the Chinese regime.
China's top disease control official has said the efficacy of the country's COVID vaccines is low.
Late-stage trials in Brazil found Coronavac, produced by Chinese company Sinovac Biotech, has a 50% efficacy at preventing infection, compared to 76% for AstraZeneca and 95% for Pfizer.
Other countries would also come to similar conclusions, which is why, while the rest of the world started opening up, China stayed under lockdown, and this iron fist policy continued to this day.
Omicron breaching Beijing's borders. A single case putting the Winter Olympics host city on high alert. China's zero COVID policy making no exceptions. In the capital city, targeted lockdowns immediately activated,
Prompting authorities there to order more rounds of mass testing in Shanghai and Tianjin. Millions of residents are also facing prolonged lockdowns as the government tries to stamp out new clusters.
China is facing its worst outbreak of COVID since the start of the pandemic. The country reported more than 3,500 new cases on Monday alone. That's actually a very high number for China.
This is one of the testing centers in China. Here, one of the citizens was pinned down to the ground. She was forced to take a Wuhan virus test.
Living in post-pandemic China, your life is at the whim of an app, a contact tracing app. If your code turns yellow, you may have to quarantine for a week. Red, 2 weeks. If you're inside a building where a COVID case is detected, you will have to quarantine there. You will be locked in. You might get locked in your home.
The Chinese government officials now installing fences in Shanghai, blocking people from leaving their homes.
The extent of my freedom is all the way to my terrace door here. We're lucky enough to at least get some fresh air outside. Our community volunteer is sending me this image of what's on the other side of our door, a freshly taped paper seal, a reminder not to leave.
Some will be sent to quarantine camps.
I don't care what your culture is or what your religion is or where you're from, but the idea of having your child, your toddler taken away from you to a quarantine camp is absolutely appalling.
And all you can do is pray that your health code doesn't turn red. everything is getting tested for COVID. Cats, crabs, people's shoes. And because businesses are constantly shutting down, there isn't enough food to go around.
现在继续奶粉，囊中羞涩，知道吧？已经等了好长时间了。我超市不开门，我买什么？我吃什么？我喝什么？
People are literally starving to death, trapped inside their own homes.
The Chinese government is concerned about being overwhelmed with its medical system, having people dying in the streets.
And for the first year, the population was docile. They listened to Daddy Xi Jinping. They complied with lockdown orders for the most part. But it's now near the end of 2022. The Chinese people have been suffering through this for around 2 years now, and it finally became too much. The footage you're watching right now is of a burning residential building in Xinjiang. And although we can't play the audio to not get demonetized, if you did hear the audio, you would hear the last screams of the residents inside. By the way, this is why you should click that join button below to watch our uncensored documentaries. The other residents could only stand by their windows to watch because all their doors were locked shut, including the doors of the burning building, all to prevent the spread of COVID. This event was the final straw. The Chinese people have had enough. Universities all over the country started organizing a mass protest by sharing images through their own version of a Google Doc. They gathered on campus grounds.
In Shanghai, a lot of people have already been detained, not only last night. They did it for everybody, for all the people, for the delivery guys not to be locked in their apartments, for everybody to be able to receive medicines and food. We need to help these people, free those people in Shanghai.
Protests are not out of the question in China, but speaking out against the CCP is.
All over the country, we're seeing different forms of protest, all against the government and all against the lockdowns.
And it's erupted into something that not even the CCP can control.
Many of the protesters held up blank pieces of white paper. One man in Beijing told Reuters the white paper represents everything we want to say but cannot say.
This is the stuff of revolution. Moments like these in history are the ones that lead to leaders getting toppled, regimes getting overthrown. And the Chinese Communist Party is doing everything in their power to stop this uprising. The Chinese government is getting desperate. They're doing everything they can to change the narrative. Anonymous Twitter accounts are spamming the protest hashtags with useless images, mostly porn. The police are deploying signal jammers so protesters can't post videos online or communicate with each other.
What you're seeing behind us here is a signal jammer, by the way. This is in Urumqi. They're sending signal jammers into places of protest in order to, stop people's cell phones so they can't send messages, they can't send videos, they can't, contact each other, they can't coordinate, that sort of thing.
They're confiscating phones, they're literally blacking out messages being sent through WeChat, which is China's version of Twitter.
People were sending me pictures of their WeChat moments all going black. Right?
Yeah, all going black.
Their moments, and a moment is kind of like a tweet, right? Let's just say their tweets were all getting pulled.
Things got so bad that Daddy CCP went to Apple and demanded they help quench the fire. So what did Apple do? Did they 1. Support free speech and the Chinese people and give the CCP the middle finger? Or 2. Did Apple instantly comply and limit their AirDrop feature on Chinese phones to prevent protesters from sharing vital protest information with each other without relying on the internet? We'll give you a second to think this one through. And if you answered 2, Apple instantly complied with Daddy CCP, you would be correct.
Earlier this month, Apple did the bidding of the Chinese government to crush domestic protests against the Communist Party there. Apple did this by disabling its permanent AirDrop feature in China, and so far only in China. It's the only country in which it's disabled. So why did Apple disable that feature in China? Well, because that feature, permanent AirDrop, allows iPhone users to communicate directly with one another, without using the internet or cellular networks, both of which, in a totalitarian state like China, are controlled by the government.
And this is how the CEO of Apple responded.
Do you have any reaction to the factory workers that were beaten and detained for protesting COVID lockdowns? Do you regret restricting airdrop access that protesters used to evade surveillance from the Chinese government? Do you think it's problematic to do business with the Communist Chinese Party when they suppress human rights?
The powers that be know they're in hot water. Even China's foreign ministry was left temporarily speechless after being asked a question on the protests.
Given the widespread display of anger and frustration at the zero COVID policy in recent days across China, is China thinking about ending it, and if so, when?
The last time there was a widespread uprising like this was Tiananmen Square back in 1989. How did that uprising end? The Chinese government deployed troops and tanks, and it ended in a massacre. And guess what? China doesn't want you to know this, but right now there are already tanks driving down the streets of Shanghai. So one can only pray for the fate of these brave demonstrators. In the coming weeks, the CCP will be doing everything they can to hide what they're doing to these protesters. They did this exact thing in the 70s when they worked with China's private hospitals to pull off one of the most gruesome schemes in their history: forced organ harvesting, where Chinese doctors forcibly extracted organs from prisoners to sell to rich foreigners who are in desperate need of an organ. But if we go into detail about this gruesome business, YouTube will definitely demonetize the video, which is why we decided to release this as a full-length private documentary only available to members of this channel. All you have to do to get instant access to the profitable business of forced organ harvesting is to click that join button below. Once you join, you'll also get access to tons of other documentaries on topics like Jeffrey Epstein, MKUltra, CIA black sites. All things too controversial for a public video, and we release a new one every month. And unlike university, we're not going to charge you thousands of dollars only to leave you in the dark about how the world really works. You'll get all this insider knowledge they'll never teach you anywhere else for just $5 a month. And there's a refund policy too, unlike most YouTube memberships. So if you join and you don't think it's worth it, email us within your first month of joining for the first time and we will personally refund you for your first month. After your first month, there is no refund. So scroll down and click that join button now.